everyone, welcome to today's little case study here. This is a lot of fun for me. I really like these. We're going to be talking to a gentleman here a little bit about his experience with the platform, how it works, what it does, things that he learned along the way, and I'm really excited about this. Now, I've talked to Tori before, and always enjoy our conversations. Great guy, been doing some really cool stuff here. So that being said, we're going to be taking this and moving it in a direction that's not typical for one of our webinars, right? This is not your normal KnowBe4 webinar. Again, this is going to be interactive. We're going to be chatting. We're going to be talking about things a little bit differently instead of just having the one person. I'm also going to be asking him some questions about things, and he's going to be sharing his insights. It is not what you're used to seeing, but I will tell you this, people really seem to enjoy this, so give it a shot. And without any further ado, let's move on. I want to introduce you to Tori Dombrowski. Tori, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a self-taught IT person. You know, my original college background comes more from an engineering standpoint, and spending some time in industry, I was working with a small business, and as that small business started to put computers network together, someone had to know how that all worked, and that kind of fell on my laps and multiple laps, my lap, and I took to it, and before long, that became my only job. And so that's what I've been doing for over 20 years now. I love the small business environment. That's where I've always worked. I've been in manufacturing the whole time. So right now, I'm, just full-time IT director for a growing company. We're Takeform Architectural Graphics, so a graphic design firm up in upstate New York. We focus on making some really nice graphics and visual effects for our customers and help them to, put in their environment their brand image and kind of really bring that forward. And so, being in a graphic design company, there's a lot of challenges, cross-platform environment and a lot of different personality types from your sales type teams, your manufacturing teams, and your graphic artists, and all sorts of things in between. So lots of fun challenges, and that's kind of who I am and where I've been.
Outstanding. I mean, that's really cool. So I have experience in manufacturing as well. We were in an aerospace manufacturing facility where I was the IT manager. We were 135,000 square feet under roof. Pretty big place. We did a lot of industrial stuff. But I also have a background in photography, which is what really got me into computers. And so the graphics design part, that sort of thing has always held that like little appeal for me. So it's kind of cool to see what y'all are doing in both sides of that. And I totally get what you're saying about the different personalities. Even when I was in manufacturing, the programmers that took the models and set them up for, say, the big mills and things like that had a very different personality than the other folks within the organization. So it is a pretty interesting challenge with lots of different, different groups there. So my background, I'm Eric Krohn. I'm a security awareness advocate here at KnowBe4. And yes, that is an actual title. Basically, what it means is I get to take the experience that I've learned over my career and share it with people. Now, my background, I got into IT back in the the mid 1990s. I got into IT, started working full time in that, and I've been in medical field. I've been in the manufacturing field. I've been a technical services manager at an MSP. I also spent about 10 years with the Department of Defense, where I ended up the security manager for the 2nd Regional Cyber Center Western Hemisphere, which was really fun to say every time you answered the phone. So I've got a lot of background, though. I've been in a lot of industries, and I became very passionate about the human side of security a while back, when I started realizing how much of a problem that users can actually cause. And I want to be clear on this because, sometimes people get a little upset by that. I'm not blaming the users as in the users have necessarily done something wrong. However, they are targeted a lot, and therefore a lot of the issues that happen come from the users. And we just, as security people, need to be sure that we're making sure that they're prepared to defend themselves. So that's my background. That's kind of where I come from. That's the passion that I have for the human element, which is why I work where I work. So, having said that, when it comes to security awareness programs, I've remembered these for a while back, but in the beginning, it all kind of came with compliance, right? And I love this picture. For certain regs, especially where I was in the military, some of it was, the requirement was to have a cipher lock for a door. Well, this would meet the compliance requirement, but it's utter garbage with respect to security, right? So awareness programs were these things that they had to do when they had to do them, and it was often kind of haphazard, right? It checked a box. Basically, you get everyone in a room, you train them, sign your name on the way out. Don't forget your coffee. There's extra donuts. Take them with you, whatever. And that met the compliance requirement. However, over the last, probably 8 to 10 years, I've seen a huge shift in how organizations are really starting to put a little bit more effort onto the human side and being very successful with that. So that's kind of where we are with security awareness. Now, it's grown up quite a bit. And I'll say this, one of the more challenging things in this sometimes is getting leadership buy-in. I get that question a lot when I speak. How do I get my leadership to do this? And a lot of people kind of feel like their leadership underestimates the risk that phishing poses. A lot of these things, and it's kind of like everything's on fire around us, like in this picture. I love this picture. But everything's around us, and we're just used to that. It's like, okay, this is fine. But they underestimate how much of an impact we can actually have through the human side of putting this out. So, Tori, I know you're a big advocate for security awareness. I know you are. And you've done some really cool stuff with your programs. Was there a reason this was specifically important to you and your organization versus like more technical controls or blinky boxes?
Yeah, so I mean, this goes back almost 5 years ago. Had my first experience with a situation where I totally knew it was going to be a user related issue. It was a lookalike domain. And so, we got an email that came in. We have some really talented, really smart people that kind of smelled a rat even early on before we'd done really targeted phishing training. And actually, I think it was our accounting person that she had to have a PO to match an ACH before she would make a payment. But they're running around the building trying to figure out who ordered $50,000 in capacitors, and capacitors sounded vaguely IT specific. And I got in the chain somewhere, and I said, well, can I see who's requesting this? And I saw the email, and right away I'm like, oh, that's a lookalike domain. That's not our domain. And we took the time to kind of get that domain shut down and stuff like that. But really quickly, I learned that you need to train your users. There is no piece of software that I can put in place to stop someone from doing something like that. And that opened my mind to the idea that we could be talked into anything if we're not careful, if we're not looking for the warning signs. And I still get people that tell me, oh, I'll recognize a phishing email because of the bad grammar or the poor spelling. I'm never going to pay the Nigerian prince. And it's like, well, that was a long time ago. They're not doing that anymore. They've really put time and effort into making this stuff good. And with the advancements in AI and scripting and other things that are out there, I mean, it is way too easy for someone on the other side to make a convincing looking email. And I knew that I had to get on the human side. And I love, I love training people. I love teaching them things. That's kind of a core value of mine. So, that was something that was like, oh, this I can do. I love putting the blinky boxes in place, but man, just give me an opportunity to train someone. And that's something I was like, this is where I want to go.
Not going to lie, that's very unusual in the technical fields that we're in. Most people I talk to, their biggest fear or biggest nightmare is having to train people. It's just kind of endemic of the types of personalities that are often pulled into IT. And that's not a bad thing. It's just some people like training people, some people not so much. And you mentioned the lookalike domain, and I'll tell you, I something just happened here actually in Florida, right in the Tampa Bay area, and I thought this was really interesting, and kind of ties to what you just were talking about with the with this lookalike domain, and it's actually about phishing, so voice phishing, right? So a local sheriff's department actually had somebody clone their website and then modify some things, and they did a really really good job at this. And what they did is it's a lookalike. It was like whatever sheriff's department dash org or something like that. I don't remember. They changed it just a little bit, right? But it looked really convincing. Well, what they did is they started calling people, and they said, "Oh, you have a late ticket, and you need to pay this, or we're suspending your license, or whatever. You need to pay this immediately. Go get a money pack. Here's a link to the website where you can see where you pay." And it was to this lookalike domain. So they used the sheriff's department as a way to get people to do that. But the website was to add authenticity to the phone call, which I thought was very interesting, and it was very well done. And they've come out and said, hey, but last I heard, they were still trying to get it to shut down. It was still up and running, which was interesting. What are your thoughts on that?
No, that's great. Not great, but that's a perfect example because, that's just it. We're so focused on like these singular aspects, whether it's a phishing link in an email or if it's that lookalike domain or if it's something else. But that's just it. As a lot of these are mixing things together, whether, you have to protect against, okay, so let's say someone maliciously gets into another user's mailbox, but happens to trip across an email thread going in a different direction. They might have just been copied on that email chain. So now you're chasing down the kind of the main people that you thought would have been the vector in which they came in, but really they came into another mailbox, and it may have been a weak password. Someone may have gotten in through a weak password, sniffed an email chain that maybe had some keywords like ACH payment or invoice due, and they hopped in the thread, spun up a lookalike domain and started sending out emails and fake invoices. And so it's those two avenues working together that comes into it. And so things like phishings, where there's the voice attached to it, my goodness, that always gets the people with this is Microsoft calling, and we've detected that there's a problem with your computer. I love it when people tell me I don't even have a computer. I don't know how I have a problem with it. And maybe it's my VCR. Maybe I should.
Yeah, I don't have a computer, but can you tell me to how to stop this from blinking the time for me? Right?
Yeah.
We're showing our age a little bit with this joke. I mean, the younger folks on here are like, "What are you talking about?"
Right.
But when they build those into those hybrid type attacks like that, and couple an email with a text message that says, "Hey, by the way, I sent you an email." I mean, these are hard. So when people look at it and say, "I'm not going to fall for the Nigerian prince stuff," they are way underestimating the complexity that's going on out there these days with these phishing attacks. So let me ask you, what did it take to get your leadership on board?
So really, it was that event that I mentioned. It was the $50,000 ACH payment through a lookalike domain, and right away, kind of accounting looks at me and says, "Okay, what are we going to put in place so this doesn't happen again?" And I looked at it and I went, "What am I going to put in place?" and I'm like, really, we just need to keep our eyes open. And we were lucky, we had some really smart people that kind of didn't allow it to go any further than it needed to go. But I recognized right away that we needed a platform where we needed to train people. And at that point, that's when phishing emails were really starting to flow into our location. We have way too many email addresses that were exposed. I've used the exposure report on the KnowBe4 website. Yeah, absolutely. And I just look at that and scratch my head going, oh man, why are we putting our email addresses out like that? But these are things that have been out for ages. So, back when you could put your email address on your website, it wasn't a concern. but that meant that we're starting to get that phishing stream coming in, and just weekly getting 3 or 4 emails from people saying, "Is this real? What do you think of this? What do you think of that?" And I'm like, I need to train these people to fish, to fish for themselves, but to see the bait for themselves. And we talked with management and recognized right away we needed some help in that area. And it took, that one incident where we recognized how much we could have lost. And then I took some time to put together some examples that we saw in our local area of locations that had hit some ransomware and some different things like that. And we put them in front of management. And I said, I can do all of the backups that I can. I can have all of the antiviruses that we can, email and spam filtering, but this stuff will still get through. We need to train our users to be more adept at identifying this stuff. So that was really, I did do the initial fish test as well and use the results from that initial fish test. And that was kind of paired all that together. And, I like to take it from a positive standpoint. I mean, it's a very negative subject, but I love teaching people and training people. So, when you say, okay, these people are not only going to learn for work, but now they're going to learn to go home in their own personal life. And they're going to be ready when that Microsoft phone call comes in and say, "No, you're not Microsoft, go fly a kite." And so the Nigerian print scams at home, they're knocking those down left and right. So, when management looked at that and they said, we're not only training our users for inside, now we're better social and global citizens. We're helping to spread that positive knowledge to our users and maybe even beyond that a little bit. So, I mean, those were the things that sort of sold it.
I love that because a lot of people forget about that when it comes to messaging this to the end users. And that is, this also helps you at home, right? So, that's a key thing that I like to tell people. Let's make sure we get that message across. We're going to be heading into the holidays at some point in time. We're heading into first quarter. We're heading into whatever. There's always a reason for the attackers to be attacking people at home too. And so this is a great message to let people know, hey, by the way, we're preparing you for that too. So no, great point on that. Now, cost-wise, I mean, so my opinion, yes, it's very inexpensive. Did you have any problems getting budget for this?
So the way our budget tends to work, especially when I was looking at something that was out of scope, I was already a couple of months into my annual budget, and it wasn't something that was kind of scoped into the budget. So, I did a little bit of just kind of bouncing around and seeing, hey, what's out there, what's available, what does it cost? And then, I realized what the cost was going to be. So we sort of moved some things around it, and then we balanced it up against what is the cost of a breach. And you do that simple comparison. It's like, wow, this is really going to help us. This is going to turn things around. Another thing that helps sell these things too is when you get that cyber insurance, that cybersecurity insurance, a lot of the organizations require you to have a training program in place. Well, you got it. This is what you're doing. This is why you do this type of stuff. And I like having a robust platform like the KnowBe4 platform because it allows me to do it in the way that I think works best for my environment. I already mentioned I have multiple personality types. If you go with something that's very canned, very out of the box, and doesn't have a lot of flexibility, you're going to have that. Not all of them are stodgy, but you can have those stodgy people that, wear the shirt tie and the tie all the way up, and they kind of walk you through all that boring content and people are falling asleep, in the background. I like having a platform that not only has that training material that can be, there's so much dynamic content in there and it's done very well. I really appreciate that. And then you compare that with the phishing test that keeps that top of mind. Our sales environment here, we deal with a network of reps that do our sales on in locations. So my upper management, this goes right to the top, and this really spoke to him. So for him, he's always talking about trying to keep our product line top of mind with our reps in the industry. So I was able to say, I'm picking a platform that allows me to keep that training top of mind with our users, because it's real easy to do that training, your annual training. So you do it in August, and then come, June the next year, that's attrition, that's gone out, and a lot of things are happening really quick, and you just kind of click that link and you go, oh man, I knew better. So keeping it top of mind, and those were things that really kind of worked for me.
Oh, that's awesome. No, I love that. That's great stories there. So Let's talk a little bit now here about this. And I love this. I just love this slide. I really, really do. It's human error or Dave versus all of the other stuff, right? We know that time is something that we all lack, right? I've never heard anyone say, I wish there were less hours in the day. That's true of me. I keep going, gosh, if I could only have a couple more hours, we'd be done with this, right? And resources are both financial and time. And I know in my history, a lot of times I found that my operational expense or my OPEX was more than the capital expense or CapEx, right? So I would buy a piece of gear and go deploy it, hopefully completely, which doesn't always happen. But I found that it took such a burden on me to then have to maintain it, to set it up, to get it working, and use it really effectively. So, I learned pretty quickly how bad that kind of gets with respect to that. So one of the things I like with the platform is I honestly think it's pretty easy to implement. So I want to talk a little bit about that part for you, because that tends to be a very time consuming thing, is getting things implemented, right? That's how things become shelfware. That's how things become unused. So tell me about the rollout. Like, was it easy? Was it hard? Did you end up using our support team, or did you have any issues?
I didn't end up using the support team. I did it all on my own. I think a lot of us IT people tend to like to, push buttons and find out how the new WYSIWYG works. So I found it relatively easy. It took a few days for me to be willing, I think, was more the thing. I'm a nervous Nelly when it comes to technology. So I know when I launch that campaign that it's going to go into people's inboxes. So things like, was it going to hit the spam filter? How are people going to respond? Things like that slowed me down for a little while. And then I started counting the cost in my head. I'm like, slowing down right now is not going to help you in the long run. And you talk about shelfware. I don't want this to get stale. This is the opportunity I have to make this work. So I guess difficulty wise, it was relatively straightforward. If you've done any kind of CMS work, it's easier than that. It's not even really as deep as doing CMS work. I was taking canned templates and making them my own without any help and just kind of doing it. It felt relatively natural, straightforward, building campaigns, things like that. I know there's the ASAP tool too as well. I predated that, so I was able to get my program up and running without having to use a tool like that. But things like that make it even easier, because they kind of take a standard approach to, here's a baseline, here's where you should start, and this is how you should go. So if you don't have any idea to where to start, you have a foundation that kind of walks you through some basics and gets you a good baseline and gets you going. And for me, it was pretty straightforward for me. I didn't find too much complicated, and I've only just found more and more ways to sort of find new and creative ways to make the program a little less stale. How's that sound?
I like it. And you mentioned the ASAP tool. That's like an automated tool, for those that don't know, that it essentially goes through and it sets up recommendations for your awareness program. You run through a couple of questions, answer that, boom, it rolls out an awareness program for you, and with the time frames and all that kind of stuff. And I agree, that's a really cool thing. I was super happy when that came out, actually, because it makes it even a little bit more easy. Now, you mentioned modifying templates and all that. Do you tend to modify most of your templates? Did you find that you need to customize things, or do you use things that are just pretty straightforward as well?
So I have a nickname with KnowBe4, and that is the diabolical one. So I like to use the canned templates. I like to use the community-driven templates. I like to use the canned templates to do things like baselines. However, I like to kind of juice things and make it move forward. So when you have low fish prone scores, how do you push it further? Well, you start to think like a hacker. So what's a hacker doing these days? Especially a hacker these days is going to be looking at an email thread. They're going to be watching the traffic going back and forth, and they're going to utilize insider information to take that one step further. So that's why I find myself modifying templates. So I love, actually, a lot of the templates that are out today. are amazingly good. The last campaign I went through, I like to kind of I do randomized. I try not to give everybody the same template. There are rare instances where I will do that if I have a particularly juicy template, and I'll launch that all at once and take advantage of a situation. But generally, I like to randomize it so that there isn't that, hey, Billy Bob, did you see this email about, free Dunkin' Donuts? Don't click on it because it's just Tori trying to get you again. I don't want to do that. I want it to be random. And this last one I went through, I like to kind of go through and say, oh, what template did this person get? And what template did that person get? And I'm like, man, these are tough templates. And there's some kind of intelligence that's built into them where they can associate things like managers' names right into an email template. It's like, oh my goodness, now this person's really got to think because, my manager's name is Fred, and I got an email from Fred, and Fred wants me to click this link. Fred might really want me to click that link, but, they're very intelligent. They're very good. The customization only comes in because I can take it one step further and use that insider information when I do a really targeted campaign.
Yeah, and that's really true. With the adding like the managers' names and things like that, you can pull that right out of Active Directory actually and have it automatically put that in there, which I think is really, really cool. But you're right, that can get really diabolical. And I think it's important that people understand that generally speaking in organizations, when you first roll out something like this, you may not want to go full Tory. Okay. You want to start off with the easier, let them get a feel for it. Let them get some wins under their belt. Let them feel good about spotting it. And then it becomes kind of like a game, right? Where you're like, okay, y'all knocked it out of the park on these. Now I'm going to make it a little bit tougher here. And, let's see what we can do. I think there's a lot of that kind of thing that can make it a little bit more fun. But yeah, I don't think you want to start off with the really, really tough stuff immediately in the beginning.
Absolutely not.
But what you do is you ratchet it up until the people are ready for that. And I'm sure now, your click rates are still going to be pretty good. And they're really good on ones that are really tough. So that's what you're kind of goaling towards, right? Now, when it came to the training piece, we've talked about the phishing piece. When it came to the training piece, what do you find is the biggest challenges rolling out the training to the employees?
The biggest challenge in rolling out the training to the employees for me is I enjoy too much going through the content that's in the mod store to try to find the ones I want to use. This year I used the assessment, the security awareness assessment program. So I was able to use that. That's a tool within the platform that allowed me to find out what are the weak spots for my users and it kind of ranked them. So now I have a great, and I'm talking about positives, not negatives, but let me get through it for a minute. I have a target. I have a subject matter that I wanted to hit more strongly than anything else. And I was able to kind of find content around that and build that campaign. One of the things I was having a problem with for a while was completion rates. So I would have a training campaign and I would say, it's going to start here and end here. And I would always have those straggling users that weren't finishing up. I don't like doing this, but I put a tattletale piece into it where notifications now go to management once a person's not completed it after so many days after the campaign has completed. So when that happens, now a manager can have that one-on-one saying, oh, you've got this training campaign. I've worked with the IT department to make sure that they told me it's going to take you about an hour to get through, and you can do it on and off over a period of time. You were given a whole month. You didn't have any vacation time. What was the reason for you not completing that? So, and the other thing I tend to do too is, I mentioned something like an hour-long training campaign. And really, I don't tend to do anything that long all in one shot, but I try to find smaller ones too. And so the biggest concern for me is really getting that middle management buy-in. If you contact your managers before you launch a campaign, say I'm thinking about doing a 15-minute campaign this month, I'm going to give users from this date to that date to complete it. You might hear, boy, we're busy right now. Could you maybe move it to next month? I've not heard that though. Most of them, right away they hear what I'm doing and they understand the idea behind it. And oftentimes I kind of partner it with it. I'll say, look, I did our security awareness assessment this year, and I'm noticing that we have a lot of weakness in this area, and I'd like to launch some training around that area and kind of give them why it's important, just a little brief. And you have to remember when you're talking to, someone else, you don't want to get into the weeds. You don't want to get into that detail, but just say, what is the impact? What's the impact to you? What's the impact to business? And then, I'm only asking for 15 minutes of their time. I'm trying to work with you. So I hope that helps.
No, that's great. And that is just great stuff that can benefit other people trying to roll this out. That's some great information for those folks to take to heart. I love getting in there with the middle managers. That idea is a very powerful one, because sometimes you even build advocates within the organization down in that mid-level that end up helping amplify your message and do a lot of really good things that, if you don't reach out in those areas, sometimes you're missing that part, right? They can be very helpful. So let me ask you though, when it comes to like your executives or your high touch users, do you treat your executives differently, or the people in these more sensitive roles, maybe in finance or something like that have a lot of clout? Do you treat them differently, train them differently?
Yes and yes. You gotta, it's a very difficult, sensitive area, because these people are going to be your boss. They're going to be people that can impact you and your job. So you don't want to come at it from a very negative perspective and really kind of lay on them that you're not doing what everybody else is doing and things like that. So you have to start from a foundation. You start from the bottom and you start to build a little house, and you go, okay, hey guys, we're training our users to make sure they're secure, and this is keeping our organization very solid. And and you slowly start to build that case. And then you back into things like, spear phishing generally is going to target high profile users like C-level executives or people touching finances and things like that. So you guys are really the most important in the group here. And, I really think that you guys can, and you start to build and you build and you build, and you get to a point where, you've now kind of talked them into, you guys are important and you guys have to do the training just as much as anybody else. And then you take it that next step and say, okay, by the way, I've built this case with you guys that you guys are going to be spear phished and you guys are higher profile. So yes, I do have them in a special group, and I will phish them in different ways and maybe throw some extra ones their way periodically so that they know what they're going to be out after. And I'm very impressed with at least our finance team. They've always been top performers annually for, when I look over a year, how many people have put in phish alerts, accurate phish alerts, and they're going to be my top performers. There will be people further down the food chain that say, you know what, I just don't get that many emails, so it's not fair. You are right. You don't get as many emails, but it's a lot more important that someone in a financial role is accurately identifying those phishing emails and marking them and moving on. So I definitely treat them differently, and I give them a lot of credit. I tend to praise them whenever I can. So, when I finish a phishing campaign, I love to follow through. I build some reports off of the information I get out of the campaign tool and send that out to the whole company. I don't name names, but I kind of give a phishing report and say, okay, this is how it went. And I sort of use psychology a little bit with color and identify those groups that did a great job with, colors that give a lot of reward. And then I kind of slowly take away, I want them all using Phish Alert. I know there are some people in my role that don't like the Phish Alert tool because they get a lot of Phish Alerts and they've got to filter through what's accurate, what's not accurate. I would much rather my users be using that Phish Alert tool than not. So I kind of, that's that top echelon, the people that are doing the Phish Alert. You guys are my heroes. And then you sort of go, okay, those people that ignored it, you guys are perfectly fine. You haven't done anything wrong. Absolutely. And then you start to get into the people that replied, and then the people that clicked, and then the people that opened attachments and went further. So, and I like to tell stories underneath those. As you can tell, I'm a storyteller. So I'll do that in an email, and I have to bold the important stuff. Otherwise people just turn off to a 10-page email that comes through. But, if you tell just a brief story under why it's important to hit that Phish Alert, ignoring's okay, but, identifying them and letting me know that you've got it is great. And then, responding to an email can lead to what is that term called, where they're leading you through an email chain. If a hacker gets you to respond and you play that response game back and forth, they can kind of build some trust. So even if there isn't a link in there and you're emailing back and forth with a hacker, sooner or later they're going to get you to trust them a little bit too much. And then just walk my way through, where the damage is moving down.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we will talk about the Phish Alert button here in just a little bit. But before we go there, let's talk a little bit about the human firewall. Building a human firewall, it's something, this doesn't happen overnight, right? It can be done more quickly than many folks think, but it's not something you can do without kind of being deliberate about it, right? It doesn't just happen on its own. So the idea, in my opinion, behind this training towards a human firewall is to actually change the organization's culture and have them be a little bit more security minded in general, right? It's not always easy, but can you tell me a few things, how they went when you deployed the platform? Like what was the good, the bad, and maybe the ugly when you first deployed the platform?
So obviously the good's going to be, when people had that first aha moment and they got hit with a phish alert, or not a phish alert, a simulated phishing campaign, and they clicked the link and they saw whether I sent them to a Rickroll or something like that, they knew right away, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And that light comes on and they start to put two and two together and they can see where that's happening. That's the good. I'll do the ugly next. The ugly is managing all of those different personalities and the different responses that you're going to get. You got to try to be positive no matter what comes back at you. And I will admit that I may have thrown a little shade at our good friends at KnowBe4 early on to say, well, it's not me, it's the platform. Just so that I could deflect a little bit, and so people don't always put it on me. I did eventually start to take responsibility as time went on intentionally. I did that knowing full well what I was doing, just so that, because you want to make friends within your organization. So deflected a little bit and said, oh, it's just a platform, it was kind of crummy, I'm sorry, I didn't have any flexibility over that, or that template, oh yeah, I know it was diabolical, but that's what was out there, and this is part of a baseline scan. And then the bad. So the bad comes in, we did get hit with ransomware. It happens. Even with an organization that's put in a training program, you already mentioned C-level executives. I had a particular C-level executive, and he didn't do his training. He kind of dragged his heels. He's on the road, a lot, and thought he was more important than that. He lives in email, so of course he's not going to make mistakes. And luckily for me, he was offsite when it happened, and he encrypted his laptop, and we keep all of the critical documents elsewhere. So we were able to kind of recover and deal with that and move on. That was very early on. I was able to use that experience, though, to take that user and say, okay, listen, Jerry over here, Jerry's about to retire in a year or two, and Jerry, who always kind of complains about technology, Jerry, Jerry, everyone's got a Jerry in their organization. And Jerry would tell me that there was no way that he could identify a phishing email because, we had one that we were able to show him that really came in. And he's like, but they use the company's email signature. How am I going to know? Ran him through the training. He came out the other side, and he became a perfect study in doing what was right. So he went from, no way am I ever going to be able to identify these things because they used their signature. There's no way that I'm going to be able to identify that, to he was the first guy to catch some fishes coming through. He's like, look at this one. Look at this one I got. Man, this is crazy. They did a really good job. I would have been duped, but that training worked. And I was able to use that Jerry experience with that C-level executive and say, you say that training's not going to help you, but I'm going to tell you, Jerry, Jerry went from being the first one that would click on anything to, he's one of my best students now. And, so that C-level executive finally did his training, kicking and screaming, went through it. I think it might have taken some encouragement from top level brass to kind of say, you got to do this. We're all doing it. And he came out the other side and he's like, yeah, you're absolutely right. He gave me that. He specifically came to me and he said, I was wrong. You were right. I can learn. There are ways that I can determine these things. So he did take responsibility.
Awesome. Oh, that's awesome to hear, and, you know, it's interesting because a lot of times we as technical people feel like we're never going to fall for these emails, but story after story, I've seen and heard of very technical people, even the people in charge of things, falling for phishing emails. I mean, I fell for one when I first started here. It was a very clever one designed as a Google Calendar invite. Nobody is above this. Nobody is beyond being able to be fished, and I think that's a great story, relating to that. And I love that they came back afterwards and said, "Okay, yeah, I did learn from it." Now, I've heard, I know you do this, and I'm always happy to talk about this. I know you do something called your fishing derby, and I want you to tell us a little bit about this fishing derby, because I think this is awesome, and this is a great way for people to understand how to kind of gamify things and make the training fun and rewarding for folks. So tell us about your fishing derbies.
Sure. So October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And so that has become my fishing derby month. And really the term fishing derby, and actually the fishing derby itself, sort of was born out of me putting up Know Before posters in our break room. And my boss is like, "Oh, what are you going to do? A fishing derby?" And I'm like, "Fishing derby? Wait a minute. Fishing derby. I'm going to do a fishing derby." Right. So, yeah, I mean, that was, I'm coming up on my third one this next month. I'm going to be doing my third fishing derby, and every year I learn about how to better influence end user behavior. So, I mean, it's not just about putting a gamified thing together. There are ups and downs to it, believe it or not. But walking into a campaign with, let's say you send out a fishing test and you might get like 3 bad results out of it, and then coming out the other end, being able to put a baseline fish out and get 0 clicks was like, this works. So that was my first year experience. I did a normal baseline type fish after my fishing derby, and it was clear as could be. No one fell for anything. Now, it was that month I was very diabolical. You yourself called me diabolical based on some of the things that I did in that derby. So the first one, for people who may not have heard the story, the first one, the first day of that campaign, I sent out a fishing email that said, here's a link to the rules for the fishing derby. So all of the people that didn't pay attention to the fact that it was October and it was fishing derby season went right for those rules and went, ah. So right out of the gate, I had a lot of people, and that was very diabolical. And I've learned to sort of moderate and maybe not start off 100 miles an hour. And boy, people, they really give me a hard time anytime I send any link in an email now. You're trying to fool me. So, but yes. So what I do is during the month of October, I kind of warn my users in advance. So as far as I'm concerned, it's game on. You've been warned in advance. I put up campaign flyers, and I tend to pick a theme around each year's, and it's always, I like this idea of sharks. So they're sharks instead of fish. So you're a shark, so you're going to bite back at the fisher. And so we build this campaign around it, and through the month, there's going to be a lot of phishing emails. They know that. And this year, I'm actually incorporating some training. So we're gonna incorporate some training and how they complete it, when they get it completed, and maybe some departmental type awards around that. But through that whole month, there's going to be a lot of phishing emails that go out, and I take every opportunity to send diabolical ones. I know the projects that are in process. I know the customers that we're working with. I know the people who are players in different areas. The HR person, she's kind of in on the game a little bit. And we do, I know a lot of organizations will do fun events in their organization. So in the beginning of football season, we'll usually have a fun football day. So I sent out a link for squares, football squares. It was going to be a football square program. And, our HR person had just put up flyers and sent out about how we were going to have our football day. And I'm like, oh, I'm piggybacking on that one. And man, the people that fell for that one were angry with me. And they kind of went to HR. I told you we should have a football square thing, and Tori just used it to. So, yeah. I've done a few things like that, and definitely take advantage of the opportunity to utilize insider information. And I follow through, especially when I have some bad ones. I follow through, or not bad ones, really in depth or diabolical ones. I follow through with, okay, guys, I know a lot of you clicked. I'm not going to name names, and I'm not going to give anyone a hard time, but I'm going to tell you the story about how that could have happened in real life. And that's, so at first I get all that animosity, and then that email goes out and they read it and they're like, I still don't think it was fair, but they back off a little bit. So at the end of the campaign, we hand out awards. This last year I did weekly rewards, and I had like juju fish or Swedish fish. So I'll have Swedish fish bags or goldfish bags, things like that, and little themed items so that they can stop by and pick them up if they had a perfect score for the week. And then at the end of the month, we'll award some top awards and things like that. This year, we're going to do more of a basket auction. So they're going to earn entries into the basket auction by fish alert clicks and completing their training on time, and they get so many awards, and there'll be different themed baskets, things like that. I'm still going to have probably the overall awards at the end, but one of the things that we run into is I put out that really diabolical template and someone clicks on it in the beginning, and then they kind of lose interest as the month goes on because they're like, well, I'm not going to get a perfect score, and I know there's going to be a handful of perfect scores, so I'm out. And they kind of just give up. So that's why I've been trying to find ways to keep people engaged, even if they click near the beginning.
Now, one of the things I really liked about your fishing derbies is, if I'm not mistaken, you treat this completely separate from the regular campaigns, right? Their click rates and stuff like this in these in the derby don't really impact them as an employee. This is a whole separate initiative, isn't it?
That is correct. That is absolutely correct, because the rules are different. And so because the rules are different, you have to treat it differently. So the year-long campaign that I do as well to kind of award people that have been kind of paying attention is completely different than the month-long campaign. And they know that up front, that, there's going to be a really focused time. And people look forward to it. I've got people that have kind of come up to me and said, oh, this is so exciting. I can't wait. You're not going to get me this year type stuff.
That's really awesome to have people looking forward to it. And I love to see that kind of creativity. I mean, I really do, because it takes the scariness away from it. It makes people understand, this can be a fun thing. This can be a decent thing. It doesn't have to be scary. And so I love that. I actually really love that. And it's one of the things I love about your fishing derbies and what you do with that. So now we're going to move on here real quick. So a lot of times and I love this picture because it just works in my head. When users learn something, like, for example, in this case, it would be how to lock a bike up. They kind of go overboard. And when they start learning how to spot fishing, or you roll out a tool to help them report fishing, sometimes they get a little bit carried away with it sometimes, with like the fish alert button, right? And I said we were going to talk about this. The fish alert button, for those that don't know, it's an add-in. You drop it in. It works with like Google and Outlook and different things like that for email. And what it does is it allows people to take a phishing or a suspected phishing email and just click a button, and it reports it to an email address within your organization that you get to pick, right? It's great because it takes it out of their inbox. If it's a simulated one from our platform, it pops up and says, good job, you spotted one. So there's positive reinforcement. But people can get a little carried away, especially in the beginning, where they start reporting everything as phishing, spam and all of those sorts of things, and anything that just looks a little weird. So did you have problems with that when you first started rolling this out?
Yeah, I definitely will admit that, that was one of the first things that people went for. And it still happens where people will see that, I'm trying to think of some good spam, Groupon, if they signed up for Groupon on their work email account, which I hope they didn't, but it happens that whatever they sign up for, they get those spam emails that come through, and I see them pop into the fish alert. That was a little annoying. It was a little difficult. It's definitely an opportunity for training to push back and say, okay, just so you understand, this is what spam is. This is how it's different than a real phishing email. Yeah. And I thank you for identifying an email that is not value added for the company and the business, and that, so you kind of lever it with, yes, you were definitely helping the company as a whole, but please don't jam up my inbox with your spam emails. So you have to say that in a careful and cautious way. I know there are new tools that are helping to identify ones that are more that can help people like me, so that I don't have my inbox clogged with spam emails. I've definitely thought about looking into that tool. I don't use it yet, but boy, that would be one added feature that would be nice, is an automated AI tool that can determine, is this spam versus is this a really phishing email, before it gets to me. So there's sort of an automated AI in between. We don't use that yet. We are still on the old school method, where I kind of look through it, and a lot of times you can see the spam just by the subject line, and then you just kind of identify it. And if it's a long-term user that just continues to do it, I'm going to delete it for now, and add it up to my log and remind them again in a month that spam is spam, and phishing is phishing, and there's a difference. And the good way to kind of push it back at them is, everyone always knows the IT department's always busy. We're always running around. That picture you had, with everything on fire, and we're just saying, everything's fine.
Yeah.
There's a joke in the sales team. I tend to pull on my hair when things aren't working so well. And so, the manager has said, if his hair is more than like 2 or 3 inches up, don't bother him. So anyways, I kind of say, okay, look, guys, every time you put that spam into the fish, with the fish alert, I've got to review it, and then hopefully get back to you if it's valid or not. Because if you hit a fish, what you think is a fish, and it came into my inbox, and I'm reviewing those and giving you feedback on, wait, no, this is legit, you have to deal with it, then you've just, it's that boy who cries wolf effect, right? If you're always fish alerting everything, sooner or later I'm going to stop responding. So if you want me to be available to take some time and review those and feedback on ones that you may be legitimate and you need to deal with, then you got to stop throwing too much garbage my way. It's that push pull part,
right?
Yeah, it's the push pull effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that the tool you were talking about is PhishER, I think.
Yes.
And I love that. It's a tool that basically takes all of these reported fishes that come in through the fish alert button, and it can group them together, so you can kind of spot really quickly if you're part of a campaign. So if people are hitting you with a bunch of stuff all at once, there's certain ways that it can actually go through and predispose or dispose of the messages and change what they are. Like it will automatically look at it and go, yes, we know that this is a spam or a phishing email, and it will automatically then, if you want it to, turn around and send an email back to people and say, thank you for reporting this. Yes, this was a phishing email. And it uses AI on that side to look at that. And the accuracy is extremely high. And you can even tweak it where if you want to make sure the accuracy is 98% before it sends something back and says, thanks for reporting that, yes, it was phishing, you can tweak that kind of stuff too. So it's a cool tool. It's a really cool tool. And I'd love to see you on it at some point in time. We need to talk about that, Tori, just to see how that works. I don't know if you've demoed it all or anything like that, but it's a pretty cool tool. So for those of you that struggle with that, that's definitely something to look at and to consider. If you're doing a lot of that reporting piece. Now, if you're a one-man shop and, you don't have very many users or they're not real active on the reporting things, you can do what you're doing, Tori, but it definitely does take some time to kind of sort through that. Now, I know in my past, I've always had a very open, like an open door policy. I'll tell people I would rather that you send me 100 ones that are not phishing emails than click on the one that is, right? Because ultimately you're ahead when it comes down to that most of the time. And I found that served me well. There was one organization I was at. We got attacked. It was a W-2 fraud attempt. And our president of our company was very hands-on. This was our HR director. And she picked up the phone and she called me and she said, look, I know it's probably nothing, but I got this email and it just feels weird to me. And sure enough, I went over and I looked at it And it was from the president of our company. It said, hey, I'm about to get on a plane. I need you to send me all the W-2s. I'm going to work on them when I'm in the air. And as soon as I land, I got to get them to the tax guy. And it wasn't completely out of the realm of, possibility with the involvement that this individual had in the organization. But she said something just feels weird about it. And sure enough, we, looked at it and the reply to address was different. It was interesting because his signature block was the actual signature block he was using at that time. And we figure the only way we could figure that out is that they got it out of his out of office response. But had she not felt okay with picking up the phone and saying, this is probably nothing but, I probably would have had my W-2 and social security number and all that stuff go right out the side door. So it's a tough balance, but I would much rather have them reporting as much as possible, and knowing that we're there to say, yeah, of course, there comes a time when you're like, yes, you don't need to send me every coupon offer. Right? So I absolutely get that. But I think it's fantastic what you're doing with the platform, with the tools. I love to see the way that you think outside the box on a lot of this stuff, like your phishing derby, like some of those diabolical templates. And every time I talk to you, I'm always happy to hear about like some of the stuff that you come up with and and the way that you do that, because it's absolutely fantastic. So having said that, we're about out of time right now. I do want to see, do you have any final advice for people watching today, people that are doing a program or thinking about doing a program?
Yeah, you definitely have to be up on top of this subject these days. Right now, another subject that's kind of come into the picture is data privacy. And starting with a security campaign where you're helping to inform your users on what they can do for their part is, I think, the foundation that starts that. And then you can build on that now with data security and explain to them that it's your responsibility to protect that. You were talking about the W-2 attack. That's a perfect example. So what type of important information are you dealing with on a day-to-day basis that could be leaked? And, it's not only about phishing, it's not only about things like that, but it's also about, being careless with that data that you have access to. And so it's a similar conversation that you get to have. And it's a very important conversation to have right now before legislation catches up with you. We already have several legislation in several states already. In fact, my state has one. California's got one, I know, and there's several other states that are doing that. I think there's even a federal one that's being bandied about. I don't know if it's happened yet, but you got to be aware of that stuff. And you're going to have to do this anyways. This is the time to do it. And don't hold back, but try to come from a positive perspective. I hope that listening to me, you can hear that I always try to do this from a positive angle. You don't have to berate your users. You don't have to talk down to them, and you don't have to, be all doom and gloom. It is tough out there, but you kind of, just like my shark analogy with my fishing derby, you say, I address whenever I'm doing a phishing email, oftentimes I say, take form sharks. That's how I address the company. It's putting that positive out there. Start with a positive, focus on the positive. You do have to report the negative when it happens, but always make sure there's some kind of positive message about enabling. It's like that, we're all Marines. Let's go. Do it. Don't hold back.
Yeah, I love that. And more carrot than stick is kind of how I'm seeing that. And I think that's really important too, because this isn't necessarily meant to be a scary experience. You don't fish people just to get them, just to make them look bad, right? And that's kind of something that goes through people's heads. And so by keeping it positive and making sure that even when people do mess up, it's like, okay, don't feel bad, but this is what we can do in the future. I think that kind of messaging goes a long way towards this. So, Tori, I just, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this and sharing your insights and what you've been doing within your organization, because I think what you do is great. Again, I think your ideas are very good in the way that you present them and the way that you roll them out to people. And I loved hearing, every time I talk to you, I love hearing about the new things that you're up to. And I love the idea with the fishing derby and now, dealing with the people that are giving up in the beginning because they're like, oh man, I blew my chance, by changing up how you're doing your prize system. I think that's all just absolutely fantastic. And it's a great way to understand different ways to think about what it is we're doing. So, again, Tori, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And folks out there, I hope you enjoyed this. If you'd like to hear more or see things like this more often, let us know, and we'll be happy to do more of that. In the meantime, stay safe and have a great day.